So the MacBook Air has officially launched with the M3 chipset, and so let's break down everything that's new. And there's actually not a lot that's new with this machine, but anywho, let's dive in. Now this very much is the textbook definition of a chip refresh. The key update is of course the brand new M3 chipset, considering Apple's only recently given the MacBook Air redesign in 2022 and they released a larger version in 2023. It makes sense we're not getting any sort of design updates, and so simple chip upgrade does make sense. For those wondering how much better the M3 is compared to the M2, we don't have to speculate because this chipset has already been released with the MacBook Pro and it's a decent upgrade. Here are some benchmarks though, I'm not gonna lie, I think I kinda got too excited about this being 3nm, and so I was expecting a massive leap forward, but this is just your usual year-over-year update. Specifically, it's 21% faster CPU-wise and 15% faster GPU-wise. In fact, even in the marketing for the M3 Air, they've compared it to the M1 chipset and not the M2. Now, yes, you could argue that makes sense considering most are not going to be upgrading yearly anyways, but that clearly shows the M3 is a pretty tame upgrade on the whole. Really, the headlining change will be hardware ray tracing, and while I don't game myself, I am excited. The most popular Mac is getting this because it could really help improve the gaming landscape for macOS, and no more is Windows going to be the default option for gamers, the Mac might be able to game as well. But people, that's really it. There's also some smaller changes like Wi-Fi 6E support, which Apple has been rolling out to new products, and more excitingly, the MacBook Air does now support 2 external displays. That's pretty cool, though this only works with the laptop lid closed, which is pretty weird. Also, the midnight color features a new breakthrough anodization seal to reduce fingerprints, which is very handy because the midnight finish on the M2 was very much a fingerprinty mess. But everything else is identical to the older Air. I was actually expecting at least one new color, but no, Apple did not give us anything. They even recycled the same bloody wallpapers, so you can't flex that you have the new MacBook Air, unfortunately. I am glad to see, however, the 13-inch and the 15-inch have been updated at the same time because it was certainly odd the larger size launched a year later with the exact same chipset, and I do low-key feel bad for those who bought that model for retail price because less than a year later, M3 is here with the 15-inch. You know what would cheer up you 15-inch MacBook Air M2 users? Subscribing to the channel, of course, not just 15-inch MacBook Air M2 users. I would greatly appreciate this from every one of you guys, and would bring you the latest commentary about the world of Apple right to subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. We're trying to hit our next milestone of 16,000 subscribers, so join the Saran Bite gang now. Anyways, the most interesting aspect about this refresh is actually nothing to do with the new Macs. It's to do with the M2 MacBook Air. You see, I doubted Mr. Gurman when he said the M2 would stay in the range, but no, the man was spot on. This is now $999 and has replaced the M1 MacBook Air, and I'm still kind of surprised they did this. I was under the assumption the 13-inch MacBook Air M3 would drop to $999. I know it's very rare Apple gives a price cut to a new product, but they have done this before because when the 2018 MacBook Air launched with a new design, it went up to $1199, which was very expensive, but within a few years it got several price cuts and eventually came back down to $999. They even did this with the new design because that originally launched at $1199 back in 2022, but when the 15-inch released, they gave it a $100 price cut, and so it made sense to me that the MacBook Air M3 would be $999 in 2024, but I guess Apple has enough M2 chips lying around to keep selling this in the range. And well, because the M2 is so similar to the M3, I definitely think most should just get that, and in fact, it's now even cheap on Apple's refurbished stores, so yes, I will likely be doing a re-review on the M2 Air post its price cut because it's become fantastic value. Now, on the other hand, I can see some arguing that only $100 more for a new chipset is a no-brainer, right? Well, if M3 came with more RAM or storage, then yes, $100 more for that is worth it. But it's still starting with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, so saving the $100 and going with M2 and spending that on the RAM or storage upgrade makes a lot more sense, and ultimately these chips aren't that different when it comes to regular usage. Also, thank you for fixing UK pricing, Apple. Finally, these prices aren't ridiculous, which is good to see. So as a recap, this is the 2024 MacBook Air range. For $999 you get the M2 chipset, that's binned. $100 more gets you the M3 chipset, also binned, and for $1299 you get the 10-core GPU, full fat M3, and of course a larger display. So yes, at last the archaic M1 MacBook Air is dead. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad machine. In fact, I'm still using one, but let's be honest, Apple should not be selling that for $999. 3 bloody years later. I would be fine if it stayed in the range for $799 or less, but if they want to continue selling it for $999, it's better they kill it off in my opinion. Now Apple's clearly refreshing the MacBook Air in March in a bid to increase Mac sales. You see, in the fourth quarter of 2023, Apple saw a steep decline in Mac sales. Macs brought in $7.6 billion, which is a large amount, yes, but it's down 34% from the $11.5 billion Apple earned in the same quarter last year. Now, Apple did launch the M3 MacBook Pros late last year, so I'm guessing that did help improve sales a little, but overall the last year has not been great for the Mac, and so clearly they're betting on the Air to pick up the slack and massively improve sales with the M3 refresh, but I have my doubts. And it's not because the M3 MacBook Air is a bad product per se, it's more to do with the fact consumers don't have much of a reason to upgrade. M1 released at the perfect time because we were stuck at home working off our Intel Macs, which were good at keeping us warm on those cold winter nights with their abysmal overheating chips and terrible battery life. And so in came M1 that literally fixed everything. It made the base Macs great again, and so there was a huge rush in demand for these models, but that's kinda died off now. For one, working from home's not a big thing anymore because society has gone back to normal post-COVID for the most part, but also let's be honest, we likely are never going to see a jump like Intel to M1 was. As I said, I was under the assumption M3 was going to be a big upgrade because it was based on 3nm. Everyone was hyping this up, but that really wasn't the case. Don't get me wrong, it's still very impressive Apple's been able to give us these consistent spec upgrades, but for those using M1 and M2, there's no reason for you to upgrade. I've had my MacBook Air for 3 years, and I'm still not experiencing any major slowdowns, so I don't see myself upgrading anytime soon. It would be nice to have the newer design for sure, but I just don't need it because the M1 Air still chugs along perfectly fine, and I'm sure that's the case for many consumers. This also means that most don't need to buy the latest and greatest. As I said earlier, my biggest takeaway from this announcement is the M2 MacBook Air starting at $1,000. Considering the M3 is so similar, I'm very sure most are just gonna get that instead. And so if you're shopping for a new Mac, I'm more likely to point you towards a refurbished M1 or M2 model that's come down in price, instead of an M3 Mac at retail price. I just don't see Mac sales ever reaching the peak they achieved during the M1 phase, no matter how good the products are. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.